Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us at this Economic and Social Research Institute launch of a report on public support for welfare policies and reducing inequality in Ireland. My name is Martina Lawless. I'm the director of the ESRI. Very glad to welcome you all to this webinar this morning. So this is presenting the outputs of some research of a project carried out in partnership with Community Foundation Ireland. We're very glad to have an ongoing relationship with them. This particular study, I think, gives some very fascinating findings on public attitudes to income inequality and the welfare policies that are aimed to address them. And we're going to see a lot of interesting findings on how these views have shifted over time, how they vary across groups, and how Ireland compares to other European countries. So the format for this morning's event is I'm going to invite Denise Charlton, who's the CEO of Community Foundation Ireland, to make a few opening remarks. Then we'll hand over to the authors of the report, Daniel Capistrano, Bertrand Maitre, and Helen Russell, to present an overview of the findings. Then we'll have a response from Louise Bayliss, who's the head of social justice and policy at the Society of St. Vincent de Paul. And then we'll have time at the end for some Q&A from the participants online. So if people have any questions or comments that occur to them as we go along, feel free to add those to the Q&A box, and we'll come back to as many of those as we can at the end. But to kick off, I'm going to hand over to Denise, who's, as I said, the CEO of Community Foundation Ireland, who's going to sort of formally launch the report. Thank you, Denise.
Thanks a million, Martina, and a huge thanks to the ESRI for the partnership and also for the very important discussion this morning. I suppose for those of you that don't know us, a little bit of background, we are a philanthropic hub and research is really important to us. Our mission is equality for all in thriving communities, and research and the partnership with the ESRI is mission critical for that. And it's mission critical in a number of ways. It really informs our actions and what we're thinking about. And this morning is really pertinent to that. And it really allows us to see where philanthropy can make a difference. And the research this morning is also an example of that. We're delighted that a donor was able to support it. And then it's also a huge resource for us in terms of a growing body of knowledge for the 5,000 partners working on the ground, other research and advocates. And as always, the ESRI provides such quality research, such thought-provoking research. And there are some great findings in this from our perspective. There's some note of cautions that we need to take note of. And so it's a really important partnership for us as we try and deliver for people, equality, place, communities and planet, countering the climate and the nature crises. As I say, this specific research, but it's always true to the work that the Economic and Social Research Institute do. They provide findings, as I say, that really provoke debate and inform policies. And we've already seen the traction that the report is getting out there in the media. So it's getting attention, and we'll have a really good discussion today. I'm not going to rehearse the findings and the recommendations. I'll leave that to the amazing experts of the ESRI. But there are a couple of things I think that really stood out for us and are standing out in the media debate this morning. And that is how public views really influence the protection or the negation or the advancement of rights on various issues. And that's really important to our equality work as well as other areas. And in this context, I think it's really reassuring that welfare benefits and the role that they're playing in narrowing the income or wealth gap is really informative and, as I said, is thought-provoking. The expertise at the ESRI really have put before us an understanding of public views, but also how they can be formed or misinformed by the public and political discourse, and how that's really important in our work, but also in wider work. We've taken comfort here as a foundation with our equality lens, and I think others will too, from the findings, that even at a time of huge uncertainty, with so many competing demands and pressures on public finances, that actually Irish people remain steadfast in their support of a fairer distribution of income or wealth. We will hear that 3 out of 4 agree that government must act to reduce income differences. And again, that has real pertinence for us. And again, noted that the higher levels of support include women and young people. And it's echoed as well, and we'll hear further on this, that strong public acknowledgement of the role played by the various forms of welfare payments, benefits, for example, for older people in childcare, enjoying popular support. And they're areas that we really care about here at the Foundation. And so that's very informative for us. The fact that over half of us, 53%, see social benefits as important in achieving a fair and equal society, that also is really informative for us. And it has highlighted the understanding that of welfare in Ireland is higher than other European countries. And again, the importance of that for policymakers and for philanthropy. The report illuminates a broad public understanding and appreciation of welfare in Ireland, as some of the examples that I've given. But it does give us a word of caution, and often with ERSI, it gives a balanced response and findings. There are some mixed attitudes, particularly towards specific welfare policies, and we'll hear more about that. For example, the one we took away, again, the needs of older people and families in need of childcare, possibly seen as more deserving than people seeking employments. So those understanding the lessons in more nuanced attitudes, very important. And very important to think that public awareness around benefits, that the opportunities provided by the welfare systems increase when they increase, that awareness that so too does support for income redistribution. But in contrast, and I think this is so pertinent and so important for us, that when the system is framed negatively in the political or public debate, that support doesn't just slip, but it actually changes. And the perception of those reliant on welfare payments, where they're just trying to make ends meet or trying to access education, training, or work. So there is an onus on us in the world of philanthropy, in the world of politics, in the world of policy development, and in the world of those working on the ground and trying to affect change. We really have to think about the impact of our words and language. And we really have to amplify the fact that, of course, people accessing welfare, they are trying to avail of their rights and entitlements rather than being self-serving or abusing a system. But if we frame it incorrectly, we need to challenge misconceptions and not and reject them and not amplify them. And I think for us, that was the huge takeaway that can't be overstated. And we have other partnerships with the ERSI, and I think, again, this research is really important. We have worked together on the issue of child poverty with many of our other grantees as well, such as the Children's Rights Alliance, Bernardo's, many out there trying to tackle the embedded issue of child poverty. And the ERSI, again, have really put a clear direction and recommendations on how to alleviate 250,000 children out of poverty. So some of the work together has had really significant impacts where Children's Rights Alliance and others have been really able to successfully advocate for changes in universal benefits, school meals, pilot projects on holiday hunger, school books. But the argument for target benefits, although it has been really well made, has actually implemented. And again, I think really a deep understanding and appreciation by the public of a role that those benefits can play. Hopefully we'll see that over the finish line. And then we'll be able to take those 250,000 children out of poverty. So that's the importance that we place on the work. And I said, we're really delighted to be a partner, really looking forward to this morning's conversation. We're delighted also that Louise Bayliss, as Martina said, will share her perspective from the ground and years working on the issues. And then in conclusion, I just want to thank Martina and ERSI and to echo her acknowledgement and congratulations to the researchers on this really important body of work, Danielle, Bertrand and Helen with other colleagues. So we will really be thinking about the recommendations and the findings in our work, and it'll inform our future actions. So thank you for the partnership, and thank you for the research and the discussion this morning.
Thanks very much, Denise. And yes, this is a very valuable partnership from the ESRI perspective as well, with Community Foundation Ireland to support us in undertaking this kind of like finding out the facts that can feed into policy priorities and objectives and actions across sort of social and economic policy world. So to move on now to the presentation of the research itself, I'd like to pass over to Daniel Capistrano, who's going to take us through the findings of the report.
Thank you very much, Martina, and thank you all for attending this webinar today. So what I'm going to do now, it's basically present some results of this research that we carried out in partnership with Community Foundation Ireland and are included in this report that's being launched today, that I prepared together with my colleagues Bertrand Maitre and Helen Russell. I am going to share now my screen here. Hopefully you'll be able to see it correctly. And let me begin by just first mentioning that I'm going to go through fairly quickly the main results from this report, but please, I encourage you to access the ESRI website, where you'll find the press release, the executive summary, and the full report as well. So let me begin by just acknowledging like the main reason why we are writing this report and conducting this research. As you know, like the ESRI has been working a lot on informing policy making in Ireland, and most of our work is based on the premise that the Irish society is willing and supportive of organizations such as the Community Foundation Ireland and the states to fulfill their missions of improving the living conditions of people in Ireland. So basically what we do in this report is really questioning this premise of the support for government action for organizations in relation to reduction of income inequality. So we basically ask the question whether there is public support for reducing income differences in Ireland, and the main finding of this research is that there is a high support and fairly consistent across time as well. So we basically go a bit further and start asking the question of which groups are more supportive of income redistribution, if we find any differences across different social groups. And as expected, and as we see in the literature, I'm going to mention that as well, we find that those groups that are more vulnerable in society, we're talking about women, the working class, younger people, they tend to be more supportive of income redistribution. But I think one of the most interesting parts of this report is that this is only part of the story. So the potential self-interest of people who could be benefited by the income redistribution. This is only part of the explanation of why people support income redistribution. There is also another story which is related to how people see who should benefit, who should be benefiting from this income redistribution. So attitudes towards fairness, their political values, or how people see social benefits and social transfers. These are also very important predictors of whether people are going to support the government action reducing income inequalities. And then the final point I'm going to also highlight here is we also try to look at some changes over time. So although we find a consistently high support for income redistribution compared to other European countries, there are some moments where we find some fluctuations of higher and lower support, and we try to investigate further what can explain this variation across time. So let me start very quickly on what we have in the literature on this topic. And they're basically organized in two main groups. We have the societal level influences and factors that will be determining income redistribution. We are talking about, for instance, how countries with higher inequality tend to have societies that support more redistribution. There's also some evidence that although apparently it's stable, the support for redistribution, the lack of major political reaction might be one of the drivers of like this support not lowering over time. And there's also some strong evidence out there saying that support for welfare policies, social transfer and distributions are conditional on the social legitimacy of the people that are targeted by these policies. And apart from this group of the literature, we also have some studies that focus on social demographic predictors. So we're talking about many studies that find that women tend to be more progressive in relation to policy preferences and support for redistribution. We also find an association between gender and generation, with more recent cohorts of women born after 1946 being more supportive of redistribution compared to men. And a very solid evidence out there as well of a strong association between socioeconomic status and overall welfare attitudes in Europe. So what we have done based on these theoretical developments, we went to look and systematize. We compiled several data from several different sources. So we use mainly the European Social Survey, which is a national representative survey that is conducted across many European countries, and it's done every 2 years, and Ireland participates in all rounds of this survey since 2002. We also draw some conclusions from European Election Studies Voter Survey, the Eurobarometer, and the National Election and Democracy Study. So we combined several different data sources where we could find some information, some insights, data about how people support income redistribution or welfare policies. We try to bring this and contrast these findings from different data sources as well. So let me start then with the key findings. As Denise mentioned in her introduction there, this is like something that we departure from is this finding that 3 in 4 Irish residents agree that the government should reduce differences in income. And this is consistent across time. So there's, as I mentioned to you, there is some fluctuations there, but it has never been lower than 68% support. And now this is the latest data that we have there from 2023 to 2024, and this is a 76% figure there, which is comparatively higher to other countries, especially in north of Europe. You see there the Netherlands 63%, Poland with 59%. So, and the overall European average is about 70%. So it's significantly higher compared to other European countries. So what are the groups then that we find higher or lower support? So if you take all the 11 rounds together from the European Social Survey from 2002 to 2004, well, we see the overall this pattern that women tend to be more supportive. So in this plot that you see there in this screen, this dark blue line there representing the proportion of women that agree that the government should reduce income differences, and this lighter orange line at the bottom, the proportion of men who agree with this statement. And only in a few occasions, like in 2016, and now into 2024, this difference is not statistically significant. But overall, if we pull together all this data, we find that women tend to be more supportive of redistribution. Another strong finding there is the association between socioeconomic status and support for redistribution. And regardless of the metric that we use there, the variable that we use there, either like the subjective feeling about their household's financial situation, or the income quintile, or the social class, they all show that those who are better off, they tend to be less supportive compared to those who are worse off in relation to their financial situation, their social class, or their income quintile. But it's also important to note that even in the top quintile, this is the group with the lowest value over there, it's still above the 60% mark. So showing that overall, regardless of social class or the financial situation, we also see a high support among those who are in better financial situation as well. So apart from class and gender, we also find some positive association. Those who are born in Ireland tend to be more supportive of redistribution as well. Those who are younger, and those that place themselves at the left, more to the left of the political ideological scale, is they tend to be more supportive of income redistribution. These are significant factors to explain this support. So now moving on from these groups and the variation across groups in relation to support for distribution to welfare for whom. So it's important to ask the question that the literature raises, that the way that people see who are the beneficiaries of these social transfers, of these welfare policies, they tend to have to play a role in how people support or not income redistribution. So we are focused now on perceptions of deservingness and beliefs about the role of social support, social benefits, social transfers. So one of the findings that is fairly coherent across all countries that participate in the European Social Survey is that the public tend to create some ranking of priorities in terms of the groups that should be to receive social benefits. So the public tend to put higher priority for older people, to guarantee living conditions for older people, to guarantee childcare for working parents is another close second overall across all countries. And across all countries as well, we see that the group that doesn't receive as much priority there are those who are unemployed. So you see that across, there is some variation in terms of the gaps, but overall the rank is about the same across these three groups. Only specifically for Ireland, as you can see here, what is interesting is that the gap between these groups is not as large as you see, for instance, in some countries, like Poland, for instance, where the support for government action to help unemployed are much lower compared to the other two groups. And we also look at how people see the importance of social benefits and their beliefs about social transfers and welfare. And to include several questions and ask people whether people agree with these statements. The statement that we have the wider support in Ireland there in 2016 is that social benefits prevent poverty. So 64% of the respondents that participated in this survey in Ireland said that social benefits, they agree that social benefits prevent poverty. And I'll come back a bit more on this later on. But the second one, in terms of agreement with this statement, is that social benefits make people lazy. So 58% of the respondents in 2016 in Ireland said that they agree that social benefits make people lazy. And then we have also some other opinions in relation to other social statements about social benefits. So whether social benefits lead to equal society, so about half of the population agreeing with that it puts a strain on the economy, and about half as well of the population agreeing with that. And the other two statements that receiving a lower agreement is cost business too much in taxes and make people less willing to care. So I'm going to focus on these two statements at the top there that received the highest agreement. First, the one that Denise also mentioned at her introduction is that 58% of the population agree that social benefits make people lazy. This is the third highest proportion in Europe, just behind Portugal and Poland. And we also looked at what types of factors could be associated with higher agreement with this statement. And we can see actually is that younger respondents, those in the brackets 18 to 24 years old, they tend to agree more with this statement compared to those in older age groups. We also find that quite a strong effect of the self-placement in the political scale. So those on the right of the political scale, they tend to agree more with the idea that social benefits make people lazy. And interesting as well that we don't find any statistical significant association with social class, and we don't find any association with gender either. So as I mentioned to you, apart from like these beliefs in relation to social benefits, we also find that perceptions on fairness and how fair is the income distribution in Ireland also affect how people support the government action to reduce differences in income levels. And we use one question that was included in the European Social Survey in relation to how people perceive the top quintile incomes and how people perceive how unfair is the bottom decile. I'm talking about 10% highest incomes in Ireland and the 10% lowest incomes in Ireland. And people are asked, how unfair do you think is this are these top incomes and are these bottom incomes there? So we looked at the relationship between how unfair people think these incomes are, this income distribution are, but specifically how unfair are the top decile incomes and the bottom decile incomes separately, and see how much this influences support for redistribution. So this is, we are showing the results here in odds ratio. So basically the higher, so this line is the showing that there is no difference between a higher or lower probability of supporting income redistribution, but values that are higher show that the perceptions of unfairness, they influence support for redistribution. So in the case of Norway, for instance, let's focus on this interesting one first here. As you can see, like this specific point here, the orange one shows how the perception of how unfair is the bottom decile, those the poorest in the income distribution, they influence their perception of support for redistribution. So they are significant. So saying that the more unfair you think this bottom decile, the incomes in this bottom decile is, the more you tend to be the probability of you support redistribution. But this effect is even higher when we look at the top decile. So how unfair people perceive the top decile, the highest incomes in the income distribution in Norway, the higher is the support for redistribution. So you can, in a way, try to look relatively which one could be having the higher impact. And in the case of Norway specifically, we see that those in the top decile, the unfairness of those in the top of the income distribution is more important for how people support or not redistribution. And another interesting case there is the policy case in which we inverse this situation. So we see here that the income, the unfairness of the income of the bottom decile is the highest effect in the probability of supporting redistribution, and the one at the top being not significant here because it's close to this line. Finally, in Ireland, what we see is that both the unfairness, the perceived unfairness of the bottom decile and the perceived unfairness of the top decile, they are influential. They have relevance to explain how people, the extent to people agree that the government should take measures to reduce income differences in Ireland. And this is overall, we see that some countries, for instance, in Portugal and Spain, in which these factors don't seem to be influential in how people support or not redistribution. And there's another survey that was conducted in August 2025 by the EU Commission on preferences in relation to taxation. And one interesting finding of the survey was that 34% of Irish residents indicated they agree with higher taxes in Ireland if this means more or better public services. And this is the sixth highest percentage across 27 EU countries. At the same time, we also find some nuance there. So another third, 35% of the population believe the taxes are too high, and another 25% think that they should remain at the current level there, with the remaining being don't know or didn't respond to this question. So let's focus now on kind of, as I mentioned to you, like it is consistently high over time, but let's look a little bit on potential fluctuations and what could explain this different change there. So this is like a plot showing the proportion they agree that the government should reduce income differences over time from 2002 to 2024. And now, as you can see, for instance, Portugal, they're consistently high with a very similar trajectory of in relation to Ireland. So we're talking about 2009 here, so beginning of the economic recession and also high unemployment rates. We have a higher proportion of people agreeing with supporting income redistribution, and we have the recovery here around 2016. And we have a bit of a decrease on that, but since then we see some kind of overall stable pattern of high support compared to other countries. And what we looked at a specific situation, that context that might have influenced people on support redistribution. What we find is that based on the data collected after the pandemic, that those participants who experienced job loss during the COVID-19 pandemic are more supportive of redistribution. And this is regardless of their financial situation or social class. So we find that overall, if you are either like in a service class, or if you're an unskilled worker, if you had a job loss, or you had your income reduced, this predicts a higher support on income redistribution in Ireland. And remember that I've shown this slide before on social benefits, and the figure here that 64% believe that the social benefits prevent poverty. So this data collection started in 2016 and ended in 2017, about May or June of 2017. So stayed doing field work for a few months there. And this coincided with a campaign from the government to incentivize people to denounce any frauds in relation to welfare payments. And the slogan of this campaign, this media campaign from the government at the time, was "Welfare cheats, cheat us all." So many posters around the city, different cities in Ireland, radio inserts and in TV as well. So there was quite a wide campaign trying to find welfare fraud and to get these identify potential fraudsters in welfare payments. And as I mentioned to you, this campaign actually started in the middle of the data collection. So this allows us to make some comparison between how people perceive this, had these views in relation to social benefits before the launch of this campaign and after the launch of this campaign. So use a statistical model there to try to compare these two periods across time. And we looked at these three views in relation to social benefits. First, the one that we are more interested in is whether there is support for the government to reduce income differences. Is those social benefits make people lazy, or the social benefits prevent poverty? So what we find is that there is no significant differences if we compare before and after the launch of this campaign for the view that the government should reduce income differences. So there's no clear pattern there, and then there's no statistical significant differences when we compare these two groups. But what we find is that when we compare the views in relation to social benefits preventing poverty, we see that after the launch of the campaign, we have a negative effect on the percentage of people agreeing that social benefits prevent poverty. So each of these points here that you're looking here are different time windows of the sample that we are looking at. So this one with the strongest negative effect is just the 1 week after or the 1 week before. So we're comparing only the interviews that were conducted a week before or 1 week after the launch of the campaign. So we see the high strong effects there. And we see that if we increase this time window there for 2 weeks, or for the full sample, which spans across all the data collection across months, we see perhaps a lower size of the effect there. So the negative effect is not as big as within this shorter time window, but it's still significant, meaning that those people that responded weeks after the launch of the campaign, they tend to be less supportive or less agree less that social benefits prevent poverty compared to those who responded to this question before the launch of this campaign. And so just to wrap up in terms of conclusions and policy implications, so what we find then with this research, there is strong support for Irish government to reduce income differences, especially to address the unfairly low income of those in the bottom of the income decile. So that's something that we can see from the data. There is support for redistribution that is higher among low-income households, female respondents, and younger people. And this is something that we kind of confirm that has been observed in other studies as well. And we find in Ireland higher than EU average level support for higher taxes, conditional of providing better public service. And of course, this may be motivated again by self-interest, but also could be related to a kind of overall general support for redistribution based on fairness and solidarity values. Another set of important findings that we highlight there is that the pandemic that we have seen a sharp increase in government social transfers was associated with an increase in support for redistribution, especially among those who were directly affected by the pandemic, who either lost their jobs or had their income reduced. And we also find that negative stereotypes about welfare recipients may undermine the support. So we looked as well as, for instance, those who agree that social benefits make people lazy, or those who don't agree that social benefits prevent poverty are less supportive of the government interfering and reducing income inequalities. And finally, we find from the data that we analyzed in this report, the importance of communication, of the role of the social protection in addressing risks and the rights and entitlements of the citizens. So I'm going to pass it on to Martina, and we're going to hear from Louise as well, but I'm happy to take any questions as well at the end in the Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Daniel. That was a great presentation of a really rich set of results. I'm now going to hand over to Louise Bayliss, who, as I said, is the head of Social Justice and Policy at the Society of St. Vincent de Paul, to give her insights and response from a position of kind of being very familiar with the situation on the ground. So over to you, Louise.
Great. Thanks very much, Martina. Good morning, everyone. I want to begin by thanking the Community Foundation of Ireland and the ESRI for publishing this very timely and important piece of research. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to respond to the findings. I also want to extend particular thanks to the authors, Daniel Capistrano, who we've just heard from, Bertrand Maitre, and of course, Helen Russell. Their work continues to provide clarity, insight, and a strong evidence base for all of us who are committed to tackling poverty and reducing inequality in Ireland. The report contains a great deal that can lift the spirits of anyone working for social justice, but it does also contain some clear warning signs that we cannot ignore. Both sides matter. The hopeful findings keep us motivated, and the challenging ones keep us grounded in the real work ahead. One of the most striking results I found was the 76% of people in Ireland support redistribution policies. It is a really strong mandate for fairness and inclusive policies. It shows that the public understands that inequality is not something we simply have to accept. It is something that can be changed when we choose to organise our resources differently. What is even more encouraging is that people are not viewing redistribution simply as a matter of taking from those who have more. The research really showed that they are recognising that incomes are too low for some groups, and that a decent society must ensure that everyone has a minimum income to live with dignity. That is important to note in public perceptions, and it does offer hope. It reflects a wider awareness that poverty is not a personal failure. It is often a result of structural barriers that can and should be addressed through public policy. Another very positive finding is that 34% of the population would support paying more taxes if this resulted in better state services. Ireland ranks 6th highest in the EU on this measure. This challenges a common claim that people always want improvements, but never want to pay for them. The reality, as this report shows, is far more hopeful. People are prepared to contribute more when they see the benefit to society. They want well-funded services. They want a state that works for everyone. They want fairness. I was also pleased to see some of the findings on migration. Half of the respondents believe that immigrants should receive the same social protective benefits once they have paid into the system for a year. Only 5% said they should never be entitled to equal entitlements. This reflects an underlying sense of decency and fairness that deserves acknowledgement. At a time when migration can sometimes be used to stoke fear or division, this level of public support for equal treatment stands out. But alongside these positive results, the report also raises concerns that we cannot ignore. The finding that 58% of respondents believe social welfare makes people lazy is worrying, especially as it was mainly young people who had a higher prevalence of that. It highlights how persistent and damaging some myths about social protection still are. These beliefs do not reflect the real lives of people who rely on social protection. They reflect a narrative that has been repeated often enough that it actually feels true to people, even though it's not. The report also looked at the impact of the 2017 campaign titled Social Welfare Cheats Cheat Us All. The data shows that after the campaign, as Daniel pointed out, the public was less likely to believe that social protection prevents poverty. Yet the campaign did not lead to an increase in reports of welfare fraud. In other words, it shifted attitudes, but not behaviour or outcomes. It increased suspicion without uncovering wrongdoing. This is a powerful reminder how influential public messaging can be. For the community and voluntary sector, there are real lessons in this. Public opinion is not fixed. It is shaped by the stories people hear and by the way issues are framed. If a negative, fear-based message can shift attitudes so quickly, then maybe a positive and empathetic message can do the same. Our policy asks are always framed by a strong evidence-based rationale. But this report shows maybe we need more than that. We need to think not only about the evidence we present, but about the way we bring people along with us. Facts do matter, but people also need to understand the human reality behind those facts. Just imagine the impact of a national campaign that focused on empathy instead of suspicion. One that showed the real barriers faced by people living in poverty. One that helped the public see not a stereotype, but a neighbour, a parent, or a young person trying to find their way. We have an opportunity to build understanding than reinforce stigma. This report also gives us a strong foundation for our budgetary ask. The public wants fairness. The public supports redistribution. The public is willing to pay more for better services when they see the value. That is a solid base for any of us organisations working to reduce poverty. The report is especially timely for the Department of Social Protection, and I know some of them are here today, as the department is currently working on the successor to the Roadmap for Social Inclusion. The findings should give the department confidence that the public supports strong and effective social protection, confidence that investment in reducing poverty is not politically risky as long as it is explained clearly and grounded in fairness, confidence that an ambitious plan will be welcomed by society. This moment matters. The next roadmap can shape Ireland's approach to poverty for years to come. It can ensure that social protection is not treated simply as a safety net, but as a foundation for opportunity and inclusion. It can help build a society where everyone has the resources they need, not only to survive, but to thrive. Poverty is not inevitable. It is influenced by choices we make as a country. And the message from this report is clear. The findings show that the public is open to better choices and fairer policies. Our job in the community and voluntary sector now is to use this evidence well and to communicate it in a way that connects with both the heart and the mind. So I want to close again by thanking the Community Foundation of Ireland, the ESRI and the authors Daniel, Bertrand and Helen. The research offers hope. It also offers direction. But more importantly, it gives us the knowledge we need to argue for the kind of Ireland we want to build together. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Louise, for the reflections there on the report. I'd encourage anybody there in the audience online to put any questions you have into our Q&A box, and we'll get the authors to respond to those. There's a first question in here, Daniel, you might respond to on the kind of coverage of the survey. Did a broad range of Irish society respond to the survey for this report? Or are there certain social groups or classes who are underrepresented or overrepresented? That's important, I guess, in understanding the results.
Exactly. So we're talking about like the Irish society overall, and it is indeed a national representative survey. The main data source that we use is the European Social Survey. So we're talking about like all folks from all parts of the country that are as likely to be interviewed for this survey. Of course, there's like if not mistaken, like 17 years of age or older. So of course, we're not interviewing children or young adolescents there, but all the rest of the population is represented there in these surveys.
Thank you. And then I guess building on some of the results you had there on different types of beneficiaries being seen as more deserving than others. We have another question from Melanie on, were there specific types of benefits that were seen more favorably than others? For example, fuel benefits versus job allowance. Were you able to drill down into that level of detail?
Yeah, I think I might ask help from Bertrand, have Ellen here, but I don't think the surveys or data source that we have actually asked it into this detail actually.
Yeah, just to say what Daniel, has mentioned, I think, there's no details really about, which specific schemes, because as well, I mean, those are European surveys as well. So of course, the kind of support, would be, sometimes maybe different across countries. So we don't have any details about, the kind of benefits, people are much more in support of.
I guess a question from myself and following on from that, the finding about perception of people in receipt of social welfare being lazy and the prevalence of that. Did it seem that that was sort of specifically targeted at unemployment benefits, or did any other benefits come in under that in terms of people who are not part of the labour market, perhaps?
Yeah, I think we actually ran a few kind of associations between that and the support for social support for the unemployed. There is some association there, so indicated that perhaps like those who are thinking about social benefits make people lazy, being related to people thinking about unemployed receiving welfare payments there. But we don't have a clear indication of whether people think that those who are unemployed receiving benefits are the ones that are lazy. It's a generic question in relation to social benefits make people lazy.
Okay, thank you. And then Niamh has a question on, could you talk through or explain the statement, less willing to care?
So again, it's one of this kind of a generic points. So there's not much like detail into that. But the assumption would be that some people would think that if you could receive social benefits, you wouldn't be caring like in the community or kind of outsourcing to the state to provide this support and not having this at the community level. But what we find in Ireland specifically is there's very low support for this view, perhaps showing that there is an indication that social benefits as promoted by the state don't have this effect of making people less willing to care.
Yes, if maybe I could just come in on that as well. I suppose this is a theme maybe in the European literature as well, that some, if you have a more developed welfare state, that you crowd out family care or community care, as Daniel says. So there are some European level studies that would look at that sort of, on a comparative basis. So, and of course, if you're providing some services by the state, then there's less, for childcare, for example, then there's that leads to differences. But overall, you don't find this crowding out effect at the at the cross national level. So I think the attitudes of the public seem to confirm what the literature says as well.
So we have a couple more questions coming in on this variation by sort of deservingness of social support. One on how it was framed in the question. Do you know if there other aspects like a criminal past could have featured in that framing? And a second on whether or not people were asked about disability or incapacity when they were thinking about who was in receipt of social benefits.
No, unfortunately, this is like a limitation of the data, actually. So these are the three groups that are actually looked into to provide this deservingness comparison between across different groups. Because as you can imagine, these questions, they tend to be very big and they have very low space for you to include groups in there. And so the focus of this issue are really on these three groups that we mentioned in the research.
Yeah. I mean, just to say it, the question itself doesn't say deserving. We're just using that, in interpreting, those differences. So it just says, do you support, government support for working parents or whatever? How much do you agree or disagree? So I suppose that idea about deservingness or those tropes could go back a very, very long way when we're talking about the poor laws or whatever, that there was this distinction between people who deserve welfare and support versus those who don't, and it was always the able-bodied who could be working were seen historically as less deserving, and you can see that there's still remnants of that view there, and I suppose worryingly amongst young people, which is Louise was picking up as well on that it's worrying that's coming up, particularly amongst that group, which you wouldn't expect given the other attitudes, towards redistribution are stronger amongst the young. So again, I don't know whether it's that group are more exposed to, social media and that negative framing of benefit recipients, that's coming from other countries. So it's not necessarily just an Irish debate, but that they're being exposed to those views more widely.
Okay, thanks. And we've got another interesting question here on the differences between men and women and how they evolved over time. It seems there seems to be an increase in support for men around the time of the financial crisis in the late 2000s. And does that point to a variation in support when people are in a position where they think they may be impacted and at increased risk of applying for social benefits? And I guess that might link to variation across countries as well. Are countries with different levels of unemployment more likely to see greater or lesser support for those benefits? More people are maybe at risk of needing to be in receipt of them themselves.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's a strong literature there on this aspect, on the importance of the perceived risk that you have of becoming unemployed, of needing some support from the state, being a driving factor for you to be more supportive of these kind of principles. So in the West, for instance, there's an interesting study, an experimental study trying to see what can explain these gender differences. And they basically find out at the end that men tend to be very overconfident in relation to their abilities and to their situation, and that tend to lead for people to dismiss social supports, whereas women tend to be more aligned in terms of confidence of possibility and more aware of possibilities and risks that are involved in perhaps needing support from the state as well.
Yeah, I think.
Sorry, go ahead, Alan.
I was just going to say, I think it's really interesting, that they increase around the pandemic also for men, and we do see those pandemic effects. So that was a time where there was really a massive government supports out there across the population, and I think it really underlined to people, that the importance of those supports, and also that they may actually face social risks that they hadn't anticipated. So I think they're really interesting findings. But I suppose the message of the report as well is that it's not simply a matter of self-interest. So it's not only that people are supporting the benefits that they think they may avail of themselves, but also, that it is influenced by people's perception of fairness and also, I suppose, sort of political ideology. So if people are more on the left, that also has a net effect, regardless of where you sit yourself and your own needs. So I think it's important that it's not just driven by self-interest.
Yeah, and a couple of sort of related questions on this area of attitudes and the framing of the different campaigns on welfare cheats. One to say there was an earlier campaign in 2012 which corresponded with the introduction of a number of sort of conditionality aspects to different welfare payments and some sanctions under the Pathways to Work scheme, and if there was any noticeable change at that earlier period. Related to that, then a question from Northern Ireland, where apparently the Department for Communities is currently launching a campaign on benefit fraud and welfare cheats. So would you say the findings of that are Ireland specific, Republic of Ireland specific, or are they something that kind of would have broad generalization?
Yeah, so I can take the first one. So we haven't looked at the 2012 campaign that you mentioned there, but another thing that we looked at, apart from looking at the welfare cheat us all campaign, we also looked at the budget launch. So every year Ireland announces in a specific date the budget for the following year, the public budget for the following year. So we kind of checked whether there was some difference in relation to how people support or not income redistribution before and after the launch. And we find some mixed results there that we need to kind of explore a bit further. We actually provide some insights there in relation to that, but we definitely need to be look for a bit more into what could be the potential effect of each budget, because each budget also has different natures, like different types of provisions that might affect differently the public debate and public perceptions in relation to these attitudes there. And Helen, so you're mentioning something as well?
No, I mean, I think obviously this is just for in Ireland, but I think those lessons could potentially be generalizable. That attitudes are influenced by public debate and what's going on out there. So I would be interesting to see what happens as a result of that campaign in Northern Ireland. Our research would suggest that it's ill-advised, because it undermines the welfare state that we are trying to maintain.
Okay, I think we're running out of time slightly here. If people are interested in more of the detail, obviously the full report is available on the ESRI's website. So I'd like to thank the research team there, Daniel, Helen, and Bertrand, for their excellent work and fantastic presentation in response to all of the questions. To Denise and the support of Community Foundation Ireland in supporting the work, and also to Louise for giving her response and insights to the work. So thank you all very much for logging on, and hope to see you again at another ESRI event soon. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.